the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to Watching the Financial Survival Network. Well, if you've been watching the market the past week, it's been imploding. Perhaps that's over for the time being. We'll find out soon enough. But my next guest, it's a simple matter. Fix the money, fix the world. Lawrence Lepard is with us now of Equity Management Associates. Lawrence, great to have you back. So, is it that simple? It's just the money and
Well,
everything's going to work?
I don't know, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times before. First of all, Kerry, thank you for having me back. I really enjoy your show and all the stuff you do. Second, I believe that at the base layer, the monetary system we have is probably the largest single causation of the difficulties that we're facing as a society. And it's really getting obvious and clear right now as we're seeing these markets blow up, the bond market blow up, the stock market blow up, the third bubble in 26 years, right? We had .com, now we had housing, now we've got the sovereign credit everything bubble. And it's blowing up. And the reason it's blowing up is you can't taper a Ponzi. And, the Fed has created a Ponzi scheme with their paper money, and they got to either keep printing, in which case it's going to become more worthless, or they got to try and stop printing, in which case we're going to have a 1929-like event. And so pick one. I'm betting that they'll ultimately go back to printing, but right now we're in that part of the cycle where they're trying to stop the printing. I like to say, and then I'll let you ask me the next question, but I like to say that, the Fed is driving a clown car on a slippery mountain road, and on one side is extreme deflation, and the other side is extreme inflation. And they drive this clown car and they keep bouncing off of the guardrails of extreme inflation and extreme deflation. And at some point, they're going to hit the guardrail hard enough, they're going to go through it. and if it's on the inflation side, we're going to have hyperinflation. If it's on the deflation side, it's going to look like 1930. We're going to have one hell of a depression. And it's sad, but it's because the model they built is a defective model. It's broken. How's that for an opening?
I love it. And I would just add to that, as long as we're dealing with analogies, dealing with the modern Keynesian economists who seem to be running the world is the equivalent of going to a used car lot where all the odometers have been reset.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that's about right. I mean, and the salespeople are Keynesians.
Yeah.
And the offsprings are the mechanics who would be looking at the cars going, hey, you know what? This shit doesn't work. But the sales guys are the Keynesians who are saying, oh, no, it's all good. We just got to add some more grease and add some more money over here, and it's all going to work out great.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Yeah.
Hey, and if you don't like these, we can find you a Tesla. They don't even age.
Yeah, right. That's
So
a different topic, but yeah.
but like you say, it all goes down to the monetary system. In the good old days, we would only have one bubble at a time because of excess. It's just human nature, right? Sure. Excess speculation is human nature. Everybody gets excited about the new thing. And back then, there wasn't the Federal Reserve to pump up all these bubbles simultaneously. So you'd have the Louisiana land bubble, the South Sea bubble, the tulip mania bubble. You'd have one at a time. But now that there's unlimited financialization and the ability to print up unlimited quantities of currency units, you can feed multiple bubbles at the same time. And then the risk is that they all blow up at the same time, right?
That's exactly right. Very well said. I mean, you missed a few. There was also the railroad bubble, the South Sea bubble, the internet bubble, et cetera. And yes, and they would be in a particular area that was hot. And behind a lot of those bubbles, there was, technical growth or something meaningful. I mean, there was the radio bubble back in, the 1920s, the electricity bubble. I mean, something new will come along. People get really excited about it. Of course, they carry it too far. But, look, the electrical bubble, was great. We've all got electricity. And in 1900, 5% of the, country had electricity. So it was, there's a lot of growth there. When you take the money, I mean, the real crime here, Kerry, as I know but just to restate it, is that when they take the interest rate down to zero, which they did, the ZIRP policy following 2008, where for many, many years, money was literally free, that just messes up capitalism in every respect. because capitalism is about how you allocate your capital to get returns, and so that those returns tell investors and entrepreneurs where they should be going. Hey, we need more of this. Go over here, you'll get a good return. And so more of that gets produced. Well, if the cost of the money becomes zero and it's free and you go anywhere and get a return, well, guess what? You're going to overinvest in absolutely everything. And that's what we've done. We've got too many NFTs. We've got too many cryptos. We've got too much of everything that's financially driven because of the low cost of capital. We've probably arguably even got another housing bubble. I mean, look at the way housing prices have been behaving. You know, it's kind of bubble-like. So yes, free capital is what's broken the system, sadly. And the Federal Reserve is responsible for that. I mean, post 2008, they kept the capital, interest rates at zero for a very long period of time.
Hey, another bubble, the money, you will also find the least credit-worthy borrowers.
Yes.
You can extort the largest return. I'm speaking specifically of the $1.75 trillion student loan debt bubble, of which already 11.1% are 90 days or more delinquent. We don't even know how many are delinquent 30 or more.
Yeah, go get a useless degree at an overpriced college, and we'll let you borrow for that. And so there's a bubble there. But as you know, they're gonna prick that one on their own, because it's pretty clear that politically they're gonna waive all that debt, which is enormously unfair to those people who worked hard to pay down their debt and those people who paid for their own college education. But that's we've also got a bubble in political behavior, because the party in control is going to say, well, if we forgive this debt, we're going to get a lot of votes. So the system is extremely broken, which does go back to the first point you made about me, which is that I say fix the money, fix the world. I mean, if we had honest money, if we had sound money, I am of the belief that many of the other problems that we're facing in the world would fix themselves. That you wouldn't have these societal issues that we have.
And let's not forget, Lawrence, that there was a period of time, I think it was, I can't remember the dates, but we basically had no central bank plotting.
Yeah, I'll tell you the dates. From 1789 to 1913, we more or less had no central bank. There was the one in a short period in the 1800s that Jackson got rid of. And then we kind of had a quasi-central bank when Lincoln printed greenbacks to finance the Civil War. But in general, the period from 1789 to 1913 was a gold standard based period. And although we had booms and busts, you had a railroad boom and bust and so on and so forth, we basically had that. If you look at it historically, that was one of the periods of the greatest wealth improvement in the history of the world. More people, in 1800, most people were, kind of dirt farmers, and everyone was alive, but they, the natural wealth growth that occurred between 1800 and 1900 was enormous. I mean, the living standard of everybody went up enormously during that time, and we were on a sound money standard. We were on a gold standard.
Yeah, like nothing humanity had ever experienced before.
Right.
Now, arguably, over the last 30 years, 40 years, we've seen more people come out of poverty than ever before on this fiat system. But the Fiat Man giveth and the Fiat Man taketh away. All of these people who are out of poverty now could be back in poverty, literally with a flick of a switch.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, it's you're right. The Fiat Man giveth and taketh away. I mean, if we have a collapse of the currency and or a collapse of the economy, things could be quite bad. And sadly, I think that some combination of those two events is going to occur. I mean, I think we're in for some rough economic times, and I don't like saying that, but it just kind of goes along with the model I use, which is we are in a fourth turning, and fourth turnings, the book is of the same name, explains that. But more or less what it means is that the rules are changing right now. I mean, we've kind of reached the end of the road on this Keynesian fiat model. And that's obvious. I mean, we had, negative interest rates for a very long time, negative real rates. We had all kinds of negative yielding debt. I mean, we had interest rates at zero. We've had enormous bubbles, which are now in the process of bursting. This is the end of an era that will be looked back on by our kids and grandkids is, what were they thinking? I mean, why did they let one group of people, the Federal Reserve Board, control interest rates? I mean, what the hell were they thinking? That was insane, right? It didn't work. But that'll be in hindsight. Right now, some people still think it's working. So
until it stops working, I guess it's working, but
right,
certainly
it's not working. Let's say this: I think we can all agree it's not working very well, right? It's it's not working very well. I mean, 8.5% inflation for somebody whose wages are flat or going up 4% a year, that's not so good, right?
And that's what they admit to. That's
right.
8.5. You and I both know the reality is it's substantially higher and probably, low double digits there.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, shadow government stats, John Williams does the best job of that. And he's showing 18% are his numbers. If you computed inflation the way we computed it back in, before they started futzing with the numbers, and we all know they futz with the numbers for their own reasons, we'd be at 18% today, which is outrageous. I mean, that means if you're saving money, you're losing 20%, almost 20% of your money every year. I mean, that's almost hyperinflationary, not quite, but headed in that direction.
I hate to be the guy who calls it, but I think we're technically there. 20% a year inflation. You lose.
That's very high inflation. Yeah.
Lose your money's worth half in 4 years, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's
well, 72s.
Yeah, and generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, countries that have this kind of high inflation and don't do something to check it, the next step is hyperinflation. And and look, we've seen many of these for years. I mean, Venezuela's been through it, Zimbabwe's been through it, Argentina's been through it a bunch of times.
Israel had it.
Israel's been through it. Yeah, I mean, the most famous one, obviously, is Weimar Germany. Big leading industrial company, probably the closest analog to us, because what's rare is inflation in the largest reserve currency. I mean, the last time that happened was in the Roman Empire. When the Roman denarius became worthless because they took all the silver out of it.
They clipped it.
They clipped it and clipped it and clipped it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was watching one of those shows like Pawn Stars, and somebody brought in a denarius, and I think Caligula was on it, and the expert was shocked because it wasn't clipped. And like
it was a real one, and did it still have silver in it? Because they debased it so much over the years, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was like a real eye opener. And how many people out there really understand what is being said here? And unfortunately, we're talking about an ignorant populace around the globe who has faith in these institutions, although
I wouldn't be quite so harsh. I wouldn't necessarily say ignorant. I would say just uninformed and not paying attention. They've been bamboozled. The people in positions of power have lied to them, and they haven't been taught to think critically, and so on and so forth. Yeah, an interesting takeaway on that. I mean, I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with it. I just love the example. Did you ever see the video? And I'm going to get the guy who did it wrong, but the video of the fella out in LA who was offering people what's that?
Mark Dice. Yeah.
Here's a candy bar. Here's 10 ounces of silver. Pick one. Most of them took the candy bar.
Yeah. Crazy. But
crazy, right?
Like you say, uninformed and ill-served by the people who are supposed to be making sure these things don't happen. So at some point, reach the tipping point. Debt jubilee, currency collapse, financial global economic collapse. What happens here?
Yeah, boy, I wish I knew, and I'm not smart enough to tell you. It could resolve itself in a lot of ways. I think there's some possibility of a deflationary collapse. There always is, but I think that we know how the policymakers will respond, or at least I believe we know how the policymakers will respond because of history, and that is to say they will print to prevent a deflationary collapse. I think there's a possibility of just very high inflation for a long period of time until they kind of get the debt to GDP ratio. I mean, part of the problem here is the debt to GDP ratio is just really blown out. And, it also blew out after World War II, and through financial repression and yield curve control, they were able to bring it back down. So they could possibly do something along those lines. It's likely to be very volatile. I mean, this is not an easy call. I mean, there could be a collapse of society from a an economy point of view. I think the most likely outcome, in my view, the most likely outcome is very high inflation. And actually, I think there's a non-zero chance, and maybe as high as maybe a good bit higher perhaps, of runaway inflation that has to lead to either a new currency or a currency reset. I mean, these are all scary and depressing things. And I've often been, people say, well, you're criticizing the system, provide a better solution. Okay, here it is. What they should do, what the monetary authorities should do, is they should say, we've messed up, we've gone too far down this wrong road, we are going to reset the financial system, and we're going to do it by doing a semi-debt jubilee, and 5 old dollars are going to be equal to 1 new dollar, and 1 new dollar is going to be backed by gold or Bitcoin, or a triumphant of gold, Bitcoin, and oil, something real and tangible, and trust me, Bitcoin is real and tangible in the sense it's an immutable ledger. And then, that new dollar will have substance to it and will not be subject to the inflationary whims that the old dollars have. And by doing a 5-for-1 split, we'll have obviously wiped out some old dollar wealth, but we'll go forward more fairly on a sound money basis. That's what we should do. It's called a financial, it's called a debt reset or financial reset. Roosevelt did it in 33 and 34 when he grabbed the gold and devalued it. That's exactly what he did. There was too much debt. We'd had too much deflation. He needed to get inflation going. But he needed to keep it. The issue then wasn't sound money because we were on a gold standard then. So, but he grabbed gold from the people, but he kept the international gold standard in place, and he reset things. And so, we need a monetary reset. The issue is that the people who are in power live and breathe and benefit from this broken system. Correct. Right. And so, while we all want that and need that, just, you and I also want term limits, right? 80% of the country wants term limits. What are the odds, Kerry, that we're going to have term limits? They're like 0, right? And so unfortunately, what I'm proposing as a solution, I think the odds of it occurring are rather low.
Yeah, and we probably think there should be an IQ test to get your voter ID card too. That just ain't going to happen. It's kind of like one of these juniors that issued way too many shares, and now they got good prospects, but their share structure is blown out. So the only thing to do is a roll up or a rollback. Right? A
rollback. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And like I say, I don't hold out a lot of hope for it happening. I think, unfortunately, and this is true, I think, of America, is we always do the right thing after we've tried all the wrong things. And so I think, Churchill said something like that. And I think I think that's what's going to happen here. I mean, we're going to have a period of significant inflation, economic pain, and close to currency collapse. And that will then force the issue, and perhaps we'll do the right thing and return to a sound money standard.
Remember, Churchill also said that God watches out for children, drunks, and the United States of America.
Well, that's good, because we're going to need some. We're going to need some help, and the dollar's going to need some help, right?
Yeah, something has to happen, and hopefully, war doesn't become the way forward as it has in the past, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I used it this weekend, got a big laugh out of it. I don't know if there was a guy named Herbert Stein who was a economist in the Nixon White House, and he coined what in economics is jokingly referred to as Steins Law. Steins Law is, if something cannot go on forever, ... it will end.
Yeah.
and you cannot grow debt at a rate in excess of the growth of GDP forever, because the GDP is what services the debt. And we've now gotten to the point where, we're at the end of the road. Something's got to give. Something just has to give. It's happening now. And I think that's important for people to understand, that we're in it right here, right now. And I think this is all going to go down in the next 2 to 5 years. There's going to be a lot of monetary changes, a lot, in my view.
So God, gold, Bitcoin, and guns, huh?
Well, that's right. I mean, obviously, I think gold and Bitcoin are your 2 monetary solutions. Ultimately, lead may be a better investment, right? I mean, food's going to count too, and self-sufficiency, and so on and so forth. Look, I hope, I think we can get through this. The other great fear I have, great concern I have, is just with some of the psychopaths at the top, do they turn this into a shooting war? I mean, fourth turnings can generally often lead to a war, and the last one was World War II. And I don't know if you saw it, Kerry. I know I saw it. I was shocked by it. I was very disappointed. The Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed last week or the week before, said something along the lines of the U.S. needs to prove that it can win a nuclear war. Okay. And I couldn't believe somebody had written such an article. Two, I couldn't believe the Wall Street Journal was so irresponsible as to print it, because no one wins a nuclear war. And we all us sane people know that. But some of these psychopaths that have power might actually begin to think they can win one. And that's just insane. War, the government, unfortunately, would like to probably cover their failure by getting us into another war. There is a part of the government you can see that's pushing, to up the Ukraine thing, to make it a bigger conflict. And, I don't know about you, but, I don't think that makes any sense at all.
Hey, you know what, Lawrence, if psychopaths are dangerous, then a psychopath with Alzheimer is really dangerous.
Well, that's true. That's exactly right. And it's not, frankly, it's not just him, it's who's around him, right? I mean, what's
really running it?
Right. Who's really pulling the strings, right? I mean, I don't think he's making a lot of decisions. That's my sense.
Every day above the ground is a good one, as they say, but maybe not so much. But, I guess we just have to hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
I think that's right.
Nothing wrong with ballistic precious metals, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what ballistic precious means, but precious metals will always have value. They will preserve your purchasing power. They'll do the job they were designed to do. For 5,000 years, they haven't failed. And in that respect, they're much better than Bitcoin because they're not nearly as volatile. You don't need a network to run them. You can see them, touch them, feel them. They're beautiful. I love gold. I love silver.
Yeah.
I also recognize that there's value in being able to instantaneously send a large amount of money to somebody else and have it be confirmed. It's pretty hard to send $1 billion worth of gold from point A to point B. You can do that with Bitcoin, very quickly.
Absolutely. Well, Lawrence, we always appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom and experience with us. We want, besides Twitter, give us your Twitter handle.
Yeah, the Twitter handle is just my name, Lawrence Lepard, just LAWRENCE I've got a website too and I put out a free newsletter. You can just put in your email at my website and you'll receive that. Every quarter we write one, and then there's sometimes interims and other reports. And the website is EMA, Edward Mark Alpha, the number 2.com. So that's the company I run. My partner and I, David Foley is my partner. We run that together, and there's a lot of information on that site, and it's free.
All right, and there's a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, awesome!
To this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget, sign up for your free newsletter. If you got a question for Lawrence, you can always shoot me an email. We'll get you an answer. Lawrence, again, thanks for coming on, and we really appreciate your work.
Thanks, Kerry. It's always fun talking with you. We see the world alike, and I enjoy that. So.